When I woke up at 5:12 a.m., my keychain felt wrong. The bedroom key was gone. Later. A single blonde hair clung to the banister, an exclamation point left by an intruder in my own home. By noon. The camera alerted me to failed garage codes. By evening, I'd called the locksmith, printed 12 copies of the new rule sheet, and prepared a hard lesson. My name is Eleanor Keane. At 5:12 in the morning, I was wide awake. It wasn't the alarm. It was a sound, a tiny metallic scrape against the wood of my own hallway floor, just outside the bedroom. A click, then a whisper. I sat up. The house was still dark, but the air felt wrong, charged. My silk robe was draped over the reading chair. I slid my hand into the pocket, my fingers tracing the familiar lump of my keychain. Except it wasn't familiar. The loop was there. The heavy fob from my late husband was there. But the single, smooth-edged slot where my personal bedroom key should have been was empty. It was gone. I held my breath, listening. Silence. The house settled back into its suburban quiet. I moved to the door, my hand hovering over the knob, not turning on the lamp. My fingers found the cool brass. A new, thin scratch gleamed in the sliver of moonlight from the window, a white line right near the keyhole. And there was a smell, faint, cloying, a floral perfume I didn't own, something sweet and cheap trying to smell expensive. It wasn't mine. I backed away from the door and reached for my phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up my face, stark and white. One notification, time-stamped at 4:58 a.m. It was from the security app I had installed myself years ago, the one I paid for. Garage access keypad entry failed 3 times. A cold dread, sharp and acidic, rose in my throat. 3 failed attempts. Someone was testing the boundaries. I left the bedroom, padding silently on the carpet runner down the hall to the main bathroom. I keep my blood pressure medication in the small, locked cabinet above the sink. It's a habit from when my son, Logan, was a teenager. The key for that was separate, a tiny silver thing hidden in a drawer. I retrieved it, my hand shaking slightly. The chrome lock on the cabinet door was fine, but I looked closer. A tiny, almost invisible scuff mark marred the white enamel paint right around the keyhole, a shadow of a different-sized key being forced. Inside, the bottle of pills wasn't where I left it. I am meticulous. I always set it label forward, on the left side of the shelf. It was now on the right, label backward. The kitchen was downstairs. The cold tile shocked my bare feet. Taped to the stainless steel refrigerator, right over the water dispenser, was a piece of paper torn from a legal pad. A note scrawled in black marker, the handwriting aggressive, all sharp angles and heavy pressure. Locked the common room. Savannah. Of course. The common room was my living room, my furniture, my books. I didn't get angry. I got methodical. This was familiar territory. My old habits from 15 years at Northwind County Family Services kicked in. You don't confront. Not yet. You don't show your hand. You document. I retrieved my phone. I took a photo of the note on the fridge, making sure the timestamp was visible. I went back upstairs and photographed the new scratch on my doorknob. I went to the bathroom and photographed the scuff on the medicine cabinet, then photographed the misplaced bottle inside. I photographed the security notification on my phone's screen. Evidence, collected before the perpetrator even knows they are being investigated. I started the coffee maker. The machine's gurgle was the only sound in the house. I stood at the kitchen window, cupping the warm, empty mug, watching the fog roll over the damp, over-manicured lawns of Harbour Ridge. This was my house. I had bought this craftsman with 20 years of dedicated savings. The deed was in the Eleanor Trust, a legal fortress I built myself. Yet, here I was. When did I become a guest in the home I owned? When did I start needing permission to enter my own living room? The sun was beginning to tint the sky a weak, watery grey. I would wait. I would not say a word about the missing key. I would not mention the garage or the tampered medicine cabinet. I would let the silence stretch until the afternoon. I wanted to see who would use that key and exactly what they planned to do with it. I poured the coffee. Black. They wanted to lock things up. Fine. It was time for a lockdown, but not in the way they thought. I am 58 years old, and I've been a widow for nearly 20 of them. I spent my career at Northwind County Family Services, 15 years navigating the wreckage people make of their families. I specialized in elder abuse and asset protection, watching decent people get swindled out of their own homes by those they trusted most. I saw the loopholes. I saw the manipulation. When I finally bought this house, this beautiful craftsman with its wide porch and solid oak floors, I bought it with 20 years of careful savings, and I did not buy it lightly. The deed isn't just in my name. It's held by the Eleanor Trust, a legal document I drafted with an old colleague, designed to be ironclad. This house was my fortress, my retirement. I took that retirement early, 3 years ago, to care for my mother in her final, difficult months. This house was supposed to be my peace. The peace lasted until my son, Logan, lost his job. He's 32. The software company he worked for went under, and suddenly, he was back at my door. A son needs his mother, and I am his mother. I opened the door, but he brought Savannah Pierce with him. She was his girlfriend then, 29 years old, all bright smiles and quick opinions. They moved into the guest wing. Then they got married, a quiet courthouse affair I was told about after the fact. We had an agreement, a clear, verbal understanding. I sat them both down in this very kitchen. "This is a temporary arrangement," I said. 6 months. You can stay for 6 months to get back on your feet. You contribute to the utilities, and you respect my space. My rules were never complicated. I'm not a tyrant. They were written on a simple, laminated card I kept on the refrigerator. Quiet hours after 10 p.m. Clean the kitchen after you use it. Give 24 hours notice before any guests sleep over. It was a foundation of mutual respect. But Savannah arrived, and the foundation began to crack. The 6-month agreement stretched into a year, then 18 months. My simple rules were ignored. The air conditioning, which I always keep at a sensible 68 degrees to save on costs, would be mysteriously cranked down to 75 when I went out. My groceries, the organic produce I budget for, started to evaporate from the pantry. The electricity bill tripled. Then her parents, the Pierces, started visiting. They are wealthy, pretentious people who walk through my home like they are scouting it for a hostile takeover. They would murmur to Savannah loud enough for me to hear about wasted space and the potential for opening up the concept by knocking down walls. They were mentally remodeling my property right in front of me. And Logan, my son, caught between his new wife and his mother, chose the path of least resistance. He chose silence. "Mum, just let it go," he'd say, his eyes never meeting mine. Don't make this a big deal. I'm tired. So I swallowed my frustration. I kept the peace. I let the small violations slide because I didn't want to lose my son over a utility bill or a stolen avocado. Until last week. Savannah found me while I was weeding the azaleas. "Eleanor," she said, her voice sugary. "I was thinking it would be so much more efficient if I had a master key." I stopped pulling weeds. I looked up at her, my gloves covered in mud. "A what?" "A key to all the rooms. Your bedroom, your office. You know, just in case of an emergency. And it would make it so much easier for me to help you clean and organize. We're family, after all." The request hung in the air, heavy and humid. She wanted access. Full access. "No. Savannah?" I said. My voice was quiet, but it was final. "My private spaces are private. That is not negotiable." Her smile didn't just fade, it vanished. It was like watching a light switch get flipped off. She stared at me, her eyes suddenly cold and assessing. She didn't argue. She just turned and walked back into my house. That was the refusal. That was the line I drew. And this morning, when I woke up to a lock being scraped and my key missing from its ring, I knew that was the moment she decided to cross it. The small aggressions, the tiny paper cuts, had been escalating for months. It wasn't one single act. It was a campaign of 1,000 quiet wounds. It started in the kitchen. I went to the pantry one morning to get my steel-cut oats, and my hand hit a new, shiny brass padlock. The door was locked. When I found Savannah, she gave me a look of practiced, pitying concern. "Oh, Eleanor," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You must have forgotten. You keep getting your groceries mixed up with ours, and you accidentally ate that expensive almond flour I bought. This is just simpler for everyone." The implication was clear. I was getting confused. I was becoming a problem to be managed. A week later, the laminated rule sheet I had kept on the refrigerator, my simple, fair rules, was gone. In its place, a magnetic whiteboard appeared. Covered in Savannah's sharp, angular handwriting, it was a complex, color-coded grid. She had assigned specific kitchen slots. I scanned the schedule and found that the prime evening hours, from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., were permanently blocked out for young couple mealtime. I was relegated to the off hours, the early afternoon or the late night slot. I was being scheduled out of my own kitchen. Then, the technology began to turn against me. I have a smart doorbell, one I installed for security. I used to check the app on my phone to see when packages arrived. One Tuesday, I tried to log in. Incorrect username or password. I tried to reset it. The email, I discovered, was no longer linked to my account. Savannah had changed the administrative access to her own. "It's just an app, Mum," Logan had said when I brought it up, his voice already weary. "It's easier if she just handles the tech stuff." I was now blind to my own front door. The cruelest cut came on a Thursday. I came downstairs to find the living room altered. The small alcove by the fireplace, where I kept my late husband's things, was empty. His service medals, the framed photo of us at Pike Place Market, the worn-out leather armchair he always sat in, they were gone. I found them in the garage, piled into a single, large cardboard box. A black marker label was scrawled on the side, "Garage Sale." I confronted Savannah, my voice shaking for the first time. She didn't even flinch. "Oh, that old stuff," she said, looking past me. "I was just tidying up, making space for a cleaner, more modern look." I cried that day. Then, I put the box in my locked office. My one consistent social event is my book club. We have met on the third Thursday of every month for 10 years. It's my turn to host in November. Savannah knew this. Yet, I found a digital invitation in my email for a massive football blowout party at my address, on the exact same night. She had invited over 30 of her friends without asking. It was the only night the game was on. "Eleanor," she chirped. "Don't worry. Your book ladies can just meet in the basement. Right. If they don't mind the noise." Her mother, Mrs. Pierce, began visiting with a tape measure. She would walk through my dining room, tapping on my walls, muttering to Savannah. "This one is definitely load-bearing," I heard her say, "but we could open up the concept with a steel beam. It would flow right into the patio." They were planning renovations. They were erasing me from the blueprints of my own life. Through all this, I tried to appeal to my son. I showed him the box. I pointed to the new lock on the pantry. I explained that I was being systematically walled off, cornered. His response came as a text message, even though he was in the very next room. "Mum, please stop. You're making things tense. Savannah is just trying to help make the house better for all of us. I'm tired. Please don't make this a big deal." The final confirmation that this was not oversight, but malice, came 3 nights ago. It was long after midnight. I was lying awake, a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I heard it. A faint, metallic scrape. Someone was at my bedroom door. It was the distinct sound of a key, the wrong key, being inserted into the lock. A jiggle. It failed to turn. A pause. And then a low, muffled giggle from the hallway before the footsteps quickly and silently retreated. They were testing me. They were trying to get in. I am not a confused old woman. I am a caseworker. That night, I went to my office, took out a fresh, hard-bound journal, and opened it to the first page. I wrote the date. I documented the pantry lock. I documented the doorbell app. I logged the garage sale box. I wrote down the exact time I heard the key in my door, 2:17 a.m. I was building my file, a family file. I looked at the list of violations, the methodical campaign of tiny needles designed to make me feel small, incompetent, and crazy. They thought I was too old, too tired, too weak to fight back. They were wrong. When someone else starts writing the rules in your own house, it is time to rewrite them. The missing key wasn't just a violation. It was a starting pistol. I stopped being a resident. I became an investigator. My old training, the instincts I had honed at North Wind, took over. I was no longer a grieving mother-in-law. I was a caseworker, and my own house was the case. My first move was digital. Logan had, years ago, set up a Keen Family shared email account, mostly for calendars and shared streaming service logins. Savannah, I knew, used it as her own. I logged in. The inbox was mundane, but the drafts folder was not. There was one, saved 2 days prior. The subject was listing copy. Inside was a fully written, nauseatingly cheerful description for an Airbnb listing. The title, Ridge House, Cozy Suite. It described my bedroom, the master suite, as a private, self-contained unit with dedicated bath. My blood ran cold. I dug deeper. In the associated cloud drive, I found a folder named Renovations. It contained a single PDF. It was a crude architectural drawing, splitting my master bedroom into a studio apartment and a private owner's hall. The file had a watermark in the bottom right corner, a sleek, silver logo for Pierce Home Partners, her father's company. They were not just planning, they had blueprints. The real evidence came from a shared tablet we kept in the kitchen for recipes. Savannah was careless. She was logged into her personal messages, which synced directly from her phone. Her message thread with her mother was a river of poison. I scrolled back, my fingers trembling. "He's not doing it," Savannah had texted her mother. "Logan is too soft. He'll follow when the money is there." Her mother replied, "Did you talk to the doctor at Rivermere Wellness?" My breath hitched. Yes. Savannah's text read, "Dr. Klein said he can't make a diagnosis, but if we provide enough behavioral examples of mild cognitive decline, he can sign the observation forms. It's the fastest way to get temporary guardianship." Good girl. That's the first step to managing her assets. My assets. My house. My mind. They were building a case to have me declared incompetent. I went back to the cloud drive. I found the spreadsheet. It was a budget. The columns were chillingly clear. Income, room 1, cozy suite. Income, room 2, Logan's old room. Kitchen use, fee per tenant. It listed projected revenue. And then, an expense line, monthly mortgage payment. I haven't had a mortgage on this house in over a decade. They were planning to take out a loan against my property, my equity, and use the rental income from my rooms to pay for it. The pieces were clicking into place, fast and sharp. The failed garage code attempt, they were testing external access for their future tenants. The strangers in the yard. I called my neighbour, a quiet man named Mr. Henderson. "Jim," I said, "I know this is odd, but have your security cameras caught anyone in my backyard this week?" He called me back in 10 minutes. "Eleanor, you're right. 2 nights ago, around 11 p.m., 2 men, walking the property line with a measuring wheel, looked like contractors. Then Savannah's mother showed up and spoke with them." While I was processing this, the mail arrived. Tucked between my utility bill and a magazine was a glossy, trifold brochure. Rivermere Wellness. The front read, "Your partner in long-term assisted living." It was an advertisement, but it felt like a summons. They were trying to get rid of me. Savannah's behavior now made perfect, sickening sense. The constant, rapid-fire questions. "Eleanor, did you take your medication? What time? What's the name of that doctor you saw last year? You seem to forget so many little things. What's your monthly income from the pension? Do you have that in writing?" She wasn't making small talk. She was collecting data. She was building the behavioral examples for Dr. Klein. I went to Logan. I showed him the brochure. I told him about the spreadsheet. I needed my son. He wouldn't look at me. He just shook his head, staring at the floor. "Mum, you're overreacting. Savannah is just a planner. She's just looking at options for the future. For all of us." "Whose future?" "Logan." I asked him. He had no answer. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place that afternoon. I was cleaning out the shared desk in the hallway. Tucked into the back of a drawer, under a pile of old manuals, was a legal-sized envelope. Inside was a blank, pristine, fillable form, a durable power of attorney. All it needed was my signature. This wasn't about a key. This was about a complete hostile takeover. I went to my office. I turned on the printer. I printed the Airbnb draft. I printed the PDF from Pierce Home Partners. I took screenshots of the text messages and printed them in color. I printed the spreadsheet. I printed the email from my neighbor. I stapled the Rivermere brochure to a blank sheet. And at the very back, I placed the blank power of attorney form. I took a black binder and a label maker. I created a new file. The label was simple. The Pierce file from key to guardianship. They seemed to have forgotten what I did for a living. For 15 years at Northwind County Family Services, I wasn't just a caseworker. I was the senior investigator for elder asset protection. I handled the ugly cases. I was the one who built the timelines that proved financial abuse. I was the one who interviewed the confused seniors and realized they were being systematically gaslit. I know the playbook for predatory guardianship because I spent my career dismantling it. They mistook my patience for weakness. They mistook my grief for senility. They were making a catastrophic, amateur error. My anger, that hot, acidic dread from the morning, had cooled. It had settled into a cold, hard clarity. This was a problem, and I solve problems. I closed the Pierce file and made 2 phone calls. My network is old, but it is solid. The first call was to Marla Ortega. We came up in the county system together. Now she's one of the sharpest civil litigators in the state. Marla, I said, I have a personal situation. I'm building a file. They're using the guardianship script. I heard her exhale sharply. Eleanor, they're fast-tracking you. Firewall yourself. Now. Send me what you have. The second call was to Nate Hollis. Nate runs a high-end security firm. He doesn't just do residential locks. He secures government buildings. He is an ANSI Grade 1 certified locksmith, and he owes me a favor from 20 years ago. Nate, I said, I have an internal security breach at my primary residence. I need a full replacement. High security, keyway, Jock Quyen, the kind you can't copy at a hardware store. And I need it this afternoon. 2 p.m., he said. Done. While I waited, I went to my office and pulled the binder for the Eleanor Trust. I reviewed the deed. I reviewed the trust's provisions. My ownership was absolute. They were not tenants in a legal sense. They had no lease. They were guests. They were living here based on a license to occupy, a license I had granted, and which I could revoke. Then I found the email, 8 months ago, when Logan first lost his job and asked to stay. I had followed up our conversation with a usage and occupancy email. I had used an old county template. It was a simple, 1-page agreement outlining shared costs, respect for private spaces, and the key clause, occupant agrees not to alter, duplicate, or provide keys to any third party without the express written consent of the owner. Logan had replied, Looks fine, Mom. Thanks. He had signed the contract with a digital timestamp. Savannah, by taking my key, had just put him in breach. I went online. I logged into my bank accounts, every one of them. I changed every password. I updated my security questions. I went to the emergency contacts and beneficiaries page. I deleted Logan's name. I removed him as the person to be contacted in case of incapacity. I replaced him with Marla Ortega. I then called all 3 credit bureaus and placed a hard freeze on my credit. No one would be taking out a mortgage in my name. Next, I unboxed the 3 new security cameras I had overnighted. These were not the Wi-Fi cameras Savannah controlled. These were independent, battery-operated units that recorded directly to internal SD cards. I placed one high on the bookshelf in the kitchen, its small black lens aimed at the refrigerator. I placed one in my office, and one in the upstairs hallway, pointed directly at my bedroom door. I finalized the event log, the journal I had started. I added the new evidence, the emails, the Airbnb draft, the text messages. I documented everything with the precision of a court filing date, time, photographic evidence, and the specific violation it represented. Then, I drafted the new rule sheet. This was not a friendly suggestion. It was a 12-point legal notice. Every rule was a direct countermeasure to one of their aggressions. It included mandatory quiet hours, prohibition on unauthorized access to smart devices, and absolute privacy of owners' quarters. My favorite was Rule 7. Any discussion or attempt to acquire power of attorney or legal guardianship over the property owner without her express, lawyer-vetted initiation will be treated as an act of financial abuse and will trigger immediate termination of occupancy. I cited the local civil code and the Harbour Ridge HOA bylaws under each point. I printed 12 copies. Finally, I drafted the conditional 30-day notice to cure. I scheduled a mobile notary. She arrived at 1:30 p.m. I signed the document in front of her. She affixed her seal, and I paid her the $50 fee. I composed a new email. The subject line was, "Urgent family meeting, 7 p.m. tonight, kitchen table." I sent it to Logan and Savannah. And, for the paper trail, I CC'd Savannah's parents. At exactly 2 in the afternoon, Nate Hollis's unmarked van pulled into my driveway. He didn't look like a plumber. He looked like a contractor, serious and efficient, carrying 2 heavy steel cases. He got straight to work. "Start with the bedroom," I told him. He replaced every significant lock in the house. My bedroom, my office, the garage, and the back door. He didn't just change the tumblers. He installed high-security, commercial-grade hardware, the kind that resists drilling and picking. "This is a restricted keyway, Eleanor," he said, holding up a heavy, complex-looking key. "You can't copy this at a hardware store. You can't copy it anywhere, period. Only my bonded office can duplicate this, and only with your written signature and password." For the front door, he removed the consumer-grade keypad Savannah had access to and installed a standalone, high-security digital deadbolt. "It has no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth," he said. "The only way to change the code is to be standing right here, with the master key. It can't be hacked remotely." He handed me the 2 new master keys. They felt heavy and serious in my palm. While Nate worked, I executed the digital lockdown. I went to the smart doorbell's main console, performed a factory reset, and took back administrative control. I created a new account, linked only to my email. I disabled the cloud recording Savannah had access to and slotted in a new 64-gigabyte memory card. From now on, it would record continuously to a physical device in my possession. I went to my medicine cabinet, photographed the scuffed lock, and then sealed the door with a bright red, tamper-proof sticker, the kind that leaves the word "void" behind if it's peeled. I photographed the before and after state. Next, the Wi-Fi. I logged into the router's administrator settings. I changed the primary network password to a 28-character alphanumeric code. Then I created a new, secondary guest network. I named it Tenant. I gave it a simple password, but throttled the bandwidth and enabled device isolation. They could check their email, but they couldn't access my printer, my computer, or the new security camera feeds. I went down the list of connected devices: Savannah's phone, Logan's laptop, her mother's tablet from her last visit, and kicked them all off the main network. By 4 p.m., Nate was gone, and my house was a fortress. I took one of the printed copies of the new rule sheet and taped it firmly to the center of the kitchen refrigerator. I placed 2 more copies in manila envelopes, one labeled Logan, one Savannah. At 4:15 p.m., I opened my email. I attached the notarized PDF of the conditional 30-day notice to cure. I sent it to Logan, Savannah, and CC'd Mr. and Mrs. Pierce. The subject was mandatory meeting 7 p.m. tonight. The body of the email was short. We will discuss the attached document and the new house rules at 7 p.m. sharp at the kitchen table. Attendance is not optional. Non-attendance will be considered an acceptance of all terms and an agreement to the 30-day notice. I texted Marla. The email is sent. Meeting at 7. Are you on standby? Her reply came in seconds. I'm free. If they call the police, you stick to the script. This is a civil dispute. Officer, they are licensees, not tenants. I'll be ready to speak to them if needed. I went to the garage, retrieved 2 empty, medium-sized cardboard moving boxes, and placed them in the front entryway. I took a black marker and wrote Savannah in large, clear letters on the side of each. Finally, I walked back into the kitchen. I took the small digital audio recorder from my office drawer. It was fully charged. I placed it on the high bookshelf, tucked just behind a row of cookbooks, its microphone facing the table. I pressed the single button. A tiny red light blinked once, then went dark. It was active. I sat down at the head of my table. The house was quiet. The new locks were silent. I poured a glass of water, looked at the clock, and waited. They arrived at 6:40 p.m., 20 minutes early. They didn't come to negotiate. They came to escalate. It wasn't just Logan and Savannah. Mrs. Pierce was with them, her face set in a mask of righteous indignation. And they brought allies, a nervous-looking man in an ill-fitting suit, clutching a briefcase, and a woman carrying a mobile notary's bag. They were staging their own intervention. I opened the front door to my fortress. "You're early," I said, my voice even. They filed into the kitchen. Savannah, fueled by a rage I hadn't seen yet, refused to sit. She marched to the center of the kitchen table and slammed a piece of metal down on the oak. It was the key, the one she had stolen, the one that, as of 2 p.m., was nothing but a useless piece of brass. "What is this?" "Eleanor," she demanded, her voice high and sharp. "Why are we locked out? Why can't I get on the Wi-Fi? What did you do?" I looked at the key, then up at her face. I allowed a small, thin smile. "What key is that?" I asked. "It's not mine. It doesn't match any of the hardware in this house." I ignored her sputtering and turned to the others. "Please, sit. As my email stated, this is a mandatory meeting regarding your occupancy." Logan sat, heavily. He looked exhausted. Mrs. Pierce and Savannah remained standing, a small, furious phalanx. The consultant and the notary hovered near the pantry, a clear violation of the new kitchen schedule. "Since you are all here," I said, picking up the manila envelopes. I slid one across the table to Logan. I held the other out to Savannah. "This is the new rule sheet. It clarifies the terms and conditions of your license to occupy this property, effective immediately." Savannah ripped the papers from the envelope. Her mother leaned in to read over her shoulder. "You can't be serious." Savannah spat. "Quiet hours, privacy of the owner's quarters." "I am perfectly serious," I said. I ticked the points off in the air. Rule 3. A prohibition on subletting or listing any portion of this property for rent. Rule 4. No unauthorized locks may be installed by any occupant. Rule 5. Any unauthorized copying, possession, or use of a key to a private area will be considered a formal act of trespass. I let that last word hang in the quiet of the kitchen. Rule 6, I continued, concerns the home's technology. All administrative rights for security systems, smart devices, and Wi-Fi networks remain with the homeowner. Any attempt to alter, block, or bypass these systems is a direct violation. I then folded my hands on the table and looked directly at Mrs. Pierce. But I want you all to pay very close attention to Rule 7. Any attempt by an occupant or their guest to solicit, draft, or file for power of attorney or legal guardianship over the homeowner must be facilitated through a court-appointed, independent legal counsel. Any private effort to do so will be treated as an act of attempted financial abuse. Mrs. Pierce's face, which had been pinched with contempt, flushed a deep, mottled red. We were just seeking consultation, she stammered. Consultation, I repeated, nodding. Of course. Which leads us to Rule 9. You will notice new, legally installed security cameras in the common areas. They are in place, and they are recording. Tampering with them is destruction of private property. I heard Logan suck in a breath. And finally, Rule 10. This is a 3-strike policy. 3 documented violations of these rules will result in the immediate, non-negotiable termination of your license to occupy. You will have 72 hours to vacate. You can't do this, Savannah shouted. This is our home. You're confused. Am I? I reached for the black binder I had prepared. The Pierce file. I opened it and turned it around, sliding it across the table. The first page was the color printout of the Airbnb listing for the cozy suite. The second was the architectural drawing from Pierce Home Partners, detailing the plan to split my bedroom. The third and fourth and fifth pages were the screenshots, the text messages between Savannah and her mother, the discussion of Dr. Klein at Rivermere Wellness, the specific plan to document my mild cognitive decline. Mrs. Pierce lunged for the binder, but Logan's hand was faster. He grabbed it. He read the first page, then the second. I watched his face drain of all color as he read the text messages. He stared at the words his wife had written. He did not look at her. He did not look at me. He just looked down, his world collapsing onto a piece of paper. The cheap-suited consultant finally spoke, his voice slick and condescending. Now, Mrs. Keene, let's all take a breath. We are here as mediators to discuss future planning, to make sure you are... I held up one hand. You, I said, cutting him off. You are the family consultant. He smiled, relieved. Yes, I'm Mr. Davies. Mr. Davies, I said. Please read Rule 12 for me. It's on the sheet your client is holding. Savannah stared at me, bewildered. Mr. Davies leaned over and read the paper. His face tightened. Read it aloud, I insisted. He cleared his throat. It says, guests of the occupants have no standing to speak on matters of household structure, finances, or homeowner or personal affairs. Correct, I said. You are a guest in my house, and you are not qualified to mediate anything. I am not yelling. I am not upset. I am stating the law. These are the rules. Savannah's face, which had been pale with rage, went white with panic. She saw her plan, her blueprints, her text messages, all laid bare on my kitchen table. She did the only thing she could. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "Yes. Help!" she yelled into the receiver, her voice suddenly transforming into a high, terrified sob. "My mother-in-law, she's having an episode. She's locked us out of our rooms. She's not making any sense, and we're scared. Please send someone." She was playing the confused old woman card, her final, desperate move. "That's a misuse of emergency services?" I said quietly. 20 minutes later, 2 officers were at my front door. They were polite, professional, and clearly wary, having been briefed on a potential geriatric mental health issue. "Ma'am, we're here for a wellness check," the senior officer said to me. "We've had a report that you've locked your family out of the home." "Good evening, officers," I said, my voice the picture of calm. "Please, come in. This is my home. They are not locked out. They are simply required to follow the new rules." I led them to the kitchen table. The allies had backed away, trying to look like innocent bystanders. "I am Eleanor Keene, the sole owner of this property," I said. I handed them the file. "This is the deed to my house, which is held in the Eleanor Trust. This is my identification. And this," I pointed to the sheet on the table, "is the license to occupy agreement under which my son and his wife reside here. And this is the new binding rule sheet, which they received today." The officer read the documents. He read the new rules. He looked at Savannah, then at me. "Ma'am," he said to me, "it seems you have your paperwork in order." He turned to Savannah. "Ma'am, this is a civil dispute. It is not a police matter. No one is being illegally held, and she has not locked you out. She is the owner, and these are her rules. As long as she has given you a proper notice to vacate, which this appears to be, there is no crime. I suggest you follow the terms of your agreement." "But she's not well." Savannah tried again. "She appears perfectly coherent and organized to me, ma'am," the officer said, his patience thinning. "This is her property. We are leaving." As the officers walked out the front door, the air in the kitchen was thick with failure. Savannah's public humiliation was total. It was then that the mobile notary, seeing her chance, stepped forward, pushed by a sharp nod from Mrs. Pierce. "Mrs. Keene," the woman said, her voice attempting to be soothing. "I know this is a stressful time. Your family is just concerned. We have a simple document here, a durable power of attorney, just to help you manage your finances." She slid the blank form from her bag, the one from my desk drawer. I looked at the woman. "Before we proceed," I said, "what is your state notary registration number?" The woman froze. I have it in my car." "That's illegal," I said, my voice flat. "A registered notary must carry their commission and their journal. You are either not a notary, or you are acting in violation of your commission. In either case, you need to leave my property." The woman blanched, grabbed her bag, and scurried out the door after the consultant. Just then, a loud, obnoxious ringtone chimed from Savannah's phone. She snatched it up. Her eyes went wide with a new horror. "What? No. Bad news, Savannah?" I asked. "It's an email," she whispered. "From the rental platform. They've flagged the listing. They said it's been reported by the legal property owner for fraudulent representation." That would be me, I said. I did that right after I locked my credit. And speaking of fraudulent representation, I tapped the black binder. You were all so interested in Dr. Klein at Rivermere Wellness. I pressed play on the small audio recorder on the shelf. My own voice filled the room, clear and steady. Hi, I'm calling to verify a doctor on your staff. A Dr. Klein. Then, the voice of the Rivermere receptionist. I'm sorry, ma'am. We have no physician consultant or staff member by that name. We never have. Mrs. Pierce gasped. That's not possible. Oh, it is, I said. I pulled out the next exhibit. But this is possible. This is a still from Mr. Henderson's security camera from last week. I turned the photo around. It clearly showed Mrs. Pierce in the shadows of my backyard, handing a key to an unknown man, the locksmith she must have hired to make the copy. That's you, isn't it? Mrs. Pierce conspiring to trespass? And Logan, I said, turning to my son. He was as white as a sheet, his eyes fixed on the text messages. You've been very quiet. You told me not to make a big deal, but you signed this. I slid the final paper in front of him, the time-stamped email, the usage and occupancy agreement from 18 months ago. Article 2, Section B, I said. Occupant agrees not to duplicate or provide access keys to any third party. You signed it. You are in breach. Your wife is in breach. And your mother-in-law is a co-conspirator. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. My phone, on the table, vibrated. A new text message. I looked at the screen. That, I said, looking up and meeting Mrs. Pierce's eyes, is from my lawyer, Marla Ortega. She's just confirmed. The court has granted the temporary protective order, effective immediately. It restrains you, your husband, and Savannah from any attempt to contact my financial institutions or pursue any form of guardianship. The game is over. The last shred of Savannah's confidence, the last trace of her smug entitlement, completely dissolved. The mask was gone. All that was left was the raw, ugly panic of being caught. I looked at the clock on the kitchen wall. The digital display glowed red, 7 p.m. Exactly. The chaos of the last hour, the police, the failed notary, the textual evidence had been the pre-trial hearing. Now, the sentencing began. As my email stated, I said into the heavy, toxic silence. This meeting begins at 7. We will now go over the terms. I turned to my son. Logan was sitting in a state of paralysis, his face grey. He was staring at the printouts of his wife's messages, the ones where she discussed his mother's cognitive decline. Logan. He flinched, his eyes slowly rising to meet mine. I slid a manila envelope across the polished oak of the table. This is a copy of the usage and occupancy agreement you and I executed via email 18 months ago, I said. He looked at it, but didn't touch it. I then pulled a small, yellowed piece of folded notebook paper from my pocket. I slid that across the table, too. And this, I said, my voice softening for just a fraction of a second, is a note you wrote me when you were 15, right after your father died. I've kept it in my desk. He unfolded it. His own childish handwriting, in blue pen, stared back at him. I promise I'll always help you, Mum. I'll keep the house peaceful. He closed his eyes. This is insane! Savannah suddenly shrieked, her voice cracking. The performance was over. This was raw panic. I don't care about your stupid papers. This is my home. To, in a last, desperate, physical act of defiance. She grabbed the stolen key, the one she had slammed on the table earlier. She ran from the kitchen. We all heard her footsteps pound down the hall to my bedroom. We heard the key slide into the new, high-security lock. We heard a sharp, metallic clack as it hit the reinforced, pick-proof steel it was not designed for. We heard her jiggle it, violently, scrape, rattle, clack. It was useless. The sound of her failure was absolute, echoing back into the kitchen. As she rattled the knob, I discreetly pressed a single button on my phone, sending a preset text message. It went to Nate Hollis, who was waiting in his van 2 blocks away. The message was simple: execute final. At that moment, Nate would be walking to the side garage door, the one Mrs. Pierce had a copy made for, P. He was replacing the last lock, neutralizing the last unauthorized key. The heist was complete. My house was secure. Savannah stalked back into the kitchen, her face crumpled in defeat. She was breathing hard. "Sit down, Savannah," I said. It was not a request. She fell into the chair. I picked up the new rule sheet and the black binder. We have established multiple severe violations of the occupancy agreement. First, the theft and duplication of a key, in violation of the agreement Logan signed. Second, the conspiracy to defraud, evidenced by the Airbnb listing. Third, the conspiracy to pursue guardianship under false pretenses. I tapped the paper. Let's review Clause 10 of the new rules. A 3-strike policy. Your attempt to bring unauthorized and fraudulent consultants into my home, followed by calling 911 under a false report, constitute strikes 2 and 3. Tonight, the 30-day notice to cure is now void. The breach is total. I looked directly at Mrs. Pierce. Your daughter is not a tenant. She has no lease. She is a guest, an occupant by license, a license that is now terminated. You can't, Mrs. Pierce shouted. I'll sue you. I'll take you to court for harassment. For what? I cut her off, my voice cold as steel. I slapped the black binder. You'll sue me. I invite you to try. I will see you in court. I will present this binder, these videos, these text messages, and the audio recording of this entire meeting. I will file a civil suit for conspiracy to commit financial elder abuse, for trespass, and for the emotional distress you and your family have inflicted. I spent 15 years at Northwind County. I know this system better than you. You will not win. Mrs. Pierce's mouth snapped shut. Logan, I said, turning back to my son. The agreement was with you. Your wife violated it. So you have a choice. You can stay. You can accept every single rule on this new sheet. And you can begin the very long, very difficult process of rebuilding my trust. Or you can leave with your wife. The decision is yours. The room was silent. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. Then, a phone vibrated. Logan's phone. On the table. He fumbled for it, his expression unreadable. He looked at the screen. It's my old boss, he muttered, almost to himself. From the software firm, he wants to set up an interview. A lifeline, a chance at a job, arriving in the precise moment his world was imploding. I leaned forward, just slightly. I spoke quietly, so only he could hear me. A house needs someone who does what is right, Logan. Not just someone who happens to live there. He looked at Savannah, her face stained with tears of rage. He looked at his mother-in-law, who was staring at me with pure venom. He looked back at me, his mother, holding the document that defined his future. He said nothing. His silence was his answer. I sighed. I reached for the last, sealed envelope on the table. Very well. I tore it open and pulled out the single sheet of paper. This, I said, my voice resonating in the quiet kitchen, is the formal notice of license revocation. It is signed, dated, and notarized. The 72-hour clock starts now. The next hour was a blur of strained, furious movement. Savannah and her mother packed, not with care, but with violence. Drawers were slammed. Hangers were thrown. I stood at my kitchen window, drinking a glass of cold water, listening to the sounds of my house rejecting them. Mrs. Pierce was the first one out, carrying a garment bag. She didn't look at me. Savannah came last, dragging a heavy, oversized suitcase. The wheels bumped loudly down the 3 brick steps of my porch, a clumsy, graceless sound of finality. She stopped on the walkway, breathing hard, her face ugly with resentment. She still had the key, the one she stole. In one last, futile gesture, she marched back to the front door and tried to jam it into the lock. It didn't even fit the keyway. It was just a useless piece of brass. She threw it. It tinked loudly against the brick pillar and fell into the azaleas. The passenger door of Mrs. Pierce's luxury sedan slammed shut. The engine was already running. As the car pulled away, the window lowered, and her mother's voice cut through the quiet neighborhood night. "You will regret this, Eleanor," she screamed. The sound was thin and powerless, swallowed by the darkness. I watched the red taillights disappear around the corner. I didn't linger. I closed the door. The sound of the new, heavy-grade deadbolt engaging with a smooth, satisfying thud. I walked back to my kitchen, the epicenter of the confrontation. The air was still, but the tension remained. I picked up the laminated, hard copy version of the new rule sheet. I fixed it to the center of the kitchen cabinet door, a place no one could miss. Under the 12 points of order, I had added one final line, printed in a bold, clear font: "Keys only open doors. Respect opens hearts." Just as I was stepping back to look at it, the doorbell rang. Not the smart doorbell, this was the old, wired chime. I opened it to find a uniformed court officer. He wasn't one of the police officers from earlier. This was a process server. "Eleanor Keene?" he asked. I have an order of protection for service," he said. He handed me a copy. "This has been served to Savannah Pierce and Mrs. Pierce. They are restrained from interfering with your financial accounts, contacting your medical providers, or coming within 100 yards of this property pending the full hearing." "Thank you, officer," I said. When I turned back, I realized I was not alone. Logan was still here. He was standing on the porch, just outside the threshold. He hadn't followed them to the car. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. He was just standing there in the dim porch light, his hands in his pockets. He hadn't made a choice. He had simply failed to move. He hadn't left with his wife. But he hadn't stayed with me. He was trapped in the doorway. On the small wooden table next to the door, where I keep the mail, was a single, small envelope. I had placed it there earlier. Inside was a new key, a single, high-security, non-duplicable key. On the front of the envelope, I had written, "For the one who respects this house." Logan saw it. His hand reached out, his fingers hovering over the white paper. He touched the corner of it, then pulled his hand back as if it were hot. The silence stretched on, broken only by the sound of the night crickets in the Harbour Ridge air. I looked at my son, this 32-year-old man, frozen. I said nothing. The envelope said everything. Slowly, deliberately. I closed the heavy front door. The new mechanism was perfectly oiled. It didn't slam. It clicked shut with the quiet, smooth precision of a bank vault. Inside the empty hallway, the new security camera I'd installed whirred silently. Its small lens captured the final image of the night, the stark white of the new rule sheet, taped to the refrigerator door, reflected in the dark glass of the microwave across the kitchen. I leaned my forehead against the cool, solid wood of the door. I put my palm flat against it, feeling the grain. I took a deep breath, the first one that reached all the way to the bottom of my lungs. This wasn't a victory. There is no victory in this kind of wreckage. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about boundaries. It was the sound of a border being drawn, fortified, and held. I reached up and flipped the switch for the porch light, plunging the entryway into darkness. The scene was closed. The house was mine. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments so we can share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, like this video, and give it a boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.